I'm so excited about our episode today. I have Tyler Milakis, the head of brand and marketing from Charlotte's Web. He is so smart, so passionate, and just brings so much about storytelling. And I can't wait to dig in with him. Thank you for coming on today, Tyler.
Yeah, super excited to be here.
Yeah. Oh, well, so I mean, I've kind of already teased it a little bit. I know we're going to be talking about stories and we're going to talk about brand strategy and all of the things that get me really excited. But even before we get there, let's kind of start with the basics. So, who are you? What's Charlotte's Web for anyone that doesn't know about it?
Yeah. So I'm Tyler Milakis. As you said, I'm the head of brand and marketing for Charlotte's Web. Charlotte's Web was originally founded as a CBD company. We are kind of in this phase of gradually evolving into a more holistic botanical wellness company. Nature's such this cool, powerful entity that CBD is always going to be a part of our story, but there's so much more that nature offers. And so we're super excited to start stepping into some of this other botanical wellness space and offering. So that's kind of what Charlotte's Web is. I've been with the company for about 2.5 years, but I've been in the industry for much longer. So
Isn't that, I love that. I do love that we are getting a chance to talk kind of at this uh, point in the brand's journey, and I always talk about it as like a brand journey because no one's I was like if you look back on where it was when you first started to where it is now and the kind of the evolution and growth that it has, everyone always says that, right? Like a brand is continuing
yeah,
to grow, continue, and needs to grow and evolve. um
absolutely.
but it needs to do that without losing what made it the brand itself, right? And so one of the things I wanted to kick off with is how do you even figure out what that origin story is? How do you get a sense of like what's that message? How do you identify that you know is going to resonate with people?
Yeah, and like with our origin story, it obviously started with a little girl named Charlotte, and it wasn't about selling product. It wasn't about pushing a product or pushing, revenue dollars. It was really to help save a little girl's life and
Yeah.
help meet her where she was at and solve a need. And I think great stories start with that. It's like this tension point where human conflict
Yeah.
needs something, needs that hero, needs that solve. Um, there was a lot of distrust around just traditional healthcare and uh, a need for real alternatives that worked and met people with where they were at. And it's a trust signal. I think that's the biggest thing. An origin story is always going to be this trust signal. And if a brand can find a way to modernize it and make it approachable, um,
Hmm.
the little thread that I always allude to in our brand, that's something that I think we get to not only live in, but play and interact in that little red thread space of how do we meet a consumer where they're
Yeah.
at? How do we make sure the message is unified, regardless of where they're seeing it? And always coming back to that trust, which is always going to be a big piece of our origin story.
Yeah, that's fascinating. And it's interesting too because I think the an origin story helps uh personalize a brand too. It doesn't feel like a corporate entity anymore. It feels like something more amorphous and something larger than that, which is I think the goal of a good brand is something that you connect with, right? And stories help do that.
Yeah, and with this next generation, like they don't just want to be part of someone that sells a product. They want to be part of something that's bigger, that stands for something bigger, that has a story, that has that gumption, that
Yeah.
like grittiness to the origin of where they started, and not lose that as they grow as a brand.
Yeah, and so the business has this amazing origin story, and we talked about it just a few minutes ago around how it's evolving and how it needs to grow. And uh, I would almost say sometimes when you have a really strong origin story, the evolution becomes even harder, right? Because you don't want to lose your soul, you don't want to feel like you're discarding something. So how are you guys walking through this evolution? What are you thinking about? What are the things that keep you up at night? But then what are the things that you're most excited about?
So many things keep me up at night. But I think around evolving a brand is it shouldn't feel like abandonment. Like that's the last thing you want is a brand evolution to feel like you're abandoning the people that have been with you for the entire time. And so we've done a lot of work of how do we bring our loyalists, the ones that have been our ride or dies, along for the
Mm,
ride. So everything that we do, all of our conversations is how are we bringing our consumers along for the ride? We transition from the hero of the consumer story to the guide, and that's like a big piece
right.
of the Stelly touring that I always look for and kind of advocate for is we have enough brands trying to be the hero and tell you what to do. We're just here to say, listen, we've got products that we believe in, they're science backed, they're efficacious. We become the guide versus the hero. And I think that's
Yeah.
something that's a big pivot for a lot of brands that we're seeing right now. Um, I think legacy brands and brands that have been around for a while and have this deep, rich origin story have earned the right to evolve. But it has to feel intentional. Like,
Yeah.
what's the why? And it's really short answer for us is it's what the consumers deserve. Like, our
Right.
consumers deserve a brand that's going to evolve to meet their needs because my needs 10 years ago are very different as I approach my late 30s on what my needs are going to be in 3 years, right?
Yeah.
And so positioning our growth as this continuation, it's not a pivot, it's not a departure. Our values are still the same. We're just approaching it with a little bit of progress, not whiplash, I think is the best
Yeah.
way to articulate. Yeah.
I think the best part about this, because you and I spoke ahead of time, obviously, and I think one of the most interesting things that you said to me in that was the brand story is not just evolving to evolve a brand story. There's a reason to evolve it, and there's product support and product innovation behind it to actually help that. We talk about it in the brand world, the reasons to believe, right? And so if you don't have really good reasons to believe, there's no real reason for anyone to trust your brand story, right? And so I love that. I tactically, I also know that evolving a brand story and evolving a brand altogether is a nightmare. Everything from
Oh, yeah.
packaging to how site experience, the tone and voice. How do you look at this brand story, this evolution, and luckily it's not like a rebrand, right? Like it's a true evolution. How do you then refine all of your marketing and messaging? How do you think about how that brand story needs to appear in your marketing and messaging, through that evolution?
Yeah, I think the biggest thing is realizing that our story is much more than a headline. I think a lot of brands are like, okay, we're going to pivot, we're going to have a new tone of voice, catchy headlines, a fun tagline, and it's realizing that a brand is not what you say it is; it's what other people feel and say about you. And so realizing
Damn,
that
that's a
this brand
line.
story touches everything. It's in everything. It's not just in a mission statement. It's not just in a headline. It's not just in a social post. It is in everything. The tone that we use, the visuals that we pick, the science that we choose to share, the culture that we align with. Every touch point is either reinforcing or diluting that original story.
Yeah,
And so I think the biggest thing is come back to intention. What's the intention? What's the why? Of every little decision that you make. It's going to feel mundane and kind of very simplistic. Because you're doing it thousands of
yeah.
times. It allows you to embed and not just talk about the brand story of this becomes a part of your fabric and how you show up.
Yeah, I think it's really interesting that you say that, and it's I think that one of the pieces that people miss in bringing a brand story to life is they don't do a great job of getting their team on board with the brand story and like
Yeah.
really getting everyone excited about the story itself, because it's easy to get excited about products. It's easy to get excited about a brand name because that you kind of have like jumped over,
It's
and but
tangible.
It's tangible. It's tangible. Yeah. The story though is harder. But if your team isn't
Yeah.
excited about the story, they're not going to be able to get everyone else excited about the brand itself too. So I know one of the things that we love to do is like workshops and brand books, making sure you got a great brand book to get everyone excited about it. What have you seen work for you guys, like internally, of trying to get people excited? Is there something that you guys do?
Yeah, so we actually had a brand day is what we called
I
it,
love that.
to where we had all of our internal team, people from our warehouse to leadership, like everyone came into the office and we walked through the brand guide. We walked through our new tone of voice. We walked through the new visuals. And so if you're, I think to your point, if your team can't say it clearly, your customers aren't going to feel it. If your
Yeah.
team isn't excited about it internally, your customers are going to feel it. Like our customers are really an extension of how we cultivate this brand essence within the organization.
Yeah.
And a brand book is a great way to do that. It is like this tangible piece that it's no longer this ethereal message of like
Yeah.
a rebrand evolution. It's like, oh, this is what it looks like. This is what it sounds like.
Yeah.
Um, and I think when you do that, it leaves room for this creative flexibility to where the story stays, the expression evolves, how we talk about it internally starts to evolve, and it's just consistency. It's
Yeah.
I think the more that you continue to rally around it as an internal team, the more that we're going to want to share and talk about it to friends and family. Word of mouth will always be one of the
Yeah.
biggest powerful tactics within marketing. Um, and so, yeah, rallying around that excitement internally and making sure that it's consistent and compelling on how not only we're talking about it, but then that'll translate into how we're talking to consumers about it ultimately.
Yeah, I love that. I think a brand day is such a great idea, and getting everyone on board all at once, and because you need to get it so that way everyone else doesn't go, oh, the marketing team's just doing this again. It's like you
Exactly.
got to get everyone really excited about it, and it's these like tactical things that no one thinks about
Mhm.
that actually has these like huge impacts. Um,
And then you
I
bribe them
think
with free food.
of
A
course,
win-win.
obviously. Yeah, I love it. I think one of the questions that I want to pose to you on this is I know we talk about like the brand story and this evolution, and you said the word, and I think that this is one of the most important ones that people forget. So I think there are three pillars when building a great brand. It's time. It just takes time, and you got to give it time. It's process, making sure you've got great processes, but then consistency and making sure you are saying the
Yeah.
same thing over and over again in the same way with the same colors and design, and you show up the same way. How do you make sure, as a team grows, as more people are interpreting the brand and showing different expressions of the brand, how do you ensure that
Yeah.
the story is still consistent and that the story is still compelling and tied to the initial concept, not the evolution as it continues to evolve on its own?
Absolutely. Yeah. And I think this is where, once the team is obviously bought in and like we're speaking the same language internally, I think the brand book, onboarding tools, creative guidelines, like all of these become crucial because that is now your North Star on how your brand is going to show up. Um, I think there's this misconception of consistency is sameness.
Yeah.
Um, I view consistency as like clarity with room to play. And so I think having, our one tagline or our one key selling point around this one product, how do you then say that same thing 25,000 different ways? And so you're not losing the essence of what you're saying, but you're lengthening the reach on how you're
Yeah.
approaching it and saying, yeah.
Yeah, I think that that's a valuable perspective because it's true. It's like the seed needs to still be the same, but everything else doesn't need to be exactly because that would get boring, right? Like you would be bored of a brand
Oh
that
yeah,
only said the same tagline over and over again.
yes, you got
So
it. Yeah.
yeah, yeah, it's like, okay, great. I've seen 8 TikToks that say the same thing. I'm good, right? I'm good. Yeah, I mean, I think that one of the things I hope our listeners do take away though is that a brand story is such an unlock for growth because it helps you refine who your customer is, why they care, what they should get excited about.
Yeah.
It's a forcing mechanism for a lot of that.
Yeah.
Um,
I,
I do want to pivot slightly into, we talked about it earlier on around innovation and consumer, um, specifically product. And I think one of the things that I would always be wary of is, and it's interesting. I just did a webinar with the team at Tracksuit, which is a brand health tracking tool, and they asked the question of how do you differentiate when something is on brand or experimental? Like when does experimenting go off brand? And I think that you start to see that in innovation too. And so I
yeah.
guess my question to you is when you're innovating, when you are thinking about this evolution, and just innovation at the product level all around, how do you
Yeah.
help make sure that it still stays on brand and consistent versus kind of going out of left field? How do you think about that?
Yeah, I think with innovation, like so many people have a different definition of innovation because we're all approaching it a little bit differently depending on like the department that you're in. For us as a brand, innovation is this solving problems better, not just launching new shiny things. So how are we solving a need better? How are we taking a everyday need state like sleep, and how are we meeting the consumer where they're at, whether that's through ingredients, whether that's through formulation, like rooted in nature, proven by science. Like that's our essence. That's kind of our sweet spot that we look at innovation through kind of this one little lens. But then we take that and broaden it. So, if you can't prove efficacy or meet that real world need, then we're like, this isn't ready for launch. We're like, is this the right product? And so it allows us to have conversations as an organization versus it just coming from R&D saying like, this is your product, go launch it.
Yeah.
We have like a lot of really cool conversations around this. It has to add value at the end of the day. If what you're doing isn't adding value or making something better for a consumer, it's just noise at that
Yeah.
point. Um, I think within innovation, renovation is something I always like to
Oh,
tease
that's
up.
cool.
There's not a rationale to launch something new. How do we take what's already in our portfolio or ecosystem and even make it better? How do we renovate it versus always trying to think of innovation?
Yeah, that's really fascinating. I love that concept because it's true. Like we make the assumption that everybody knows everything about us, and sometimes just bringing up something that we've done before that we're proud of still. Like it shouldn't like obviously don't dredge up stuff that you're not super excited about, but like it should be something like super valuable and still relevant. I think that that is a great idea and something
Yeah.
that's super valuable. Um, I love that idea of also like having to tie to uh, kind of the business and then the brand itself, because I do think that that is key. Um, but I can imagine that as you're innovating, there is this element of how do I make sure I don't lose my legacy, right? Like you guys going through this brand evolution, how do you make sure you don't lose because the story is very particular about the beginning of the business. So how do
Yeah.
you refine that story or how do you even innovate to this next stage without losing that initial, crux of the business?
Yeah. Um, I think short answer is we don't like we adjust our tactics. We don't adjust our North Star. Like our North
Mm,
Star will always be Charlotte and her legacy. Our North Star will always be helping people own their wellness journey. Like those two things will never change. How we're thinking about it, how we're talking about it, how we're creating new visuals or a catchy tagline or a headline, like those things can change, but our North Star and the essence of those things and our why we show up as a business and as a team, that never changes. I think when you have a true North Star like that, it gives you room to explore. Um, as long as it serves the mission, like everything is going to ladder up to, is this serving our mission? Is this serving our purpose? And even getting started or joining this organization to begin with. Innovation with purpose is brand growth. Innovation without it becomes distraction.
Yeah, yeah, that is. Uh, I might steal that. I hope you don't mind, Tyler, because I think that is, there's so many people that need to hear that. The idea that just innovating for innovating's sake is just, it's a waste of time at that point. Because if you don't know where you're going or why you're doing it, I mean, that's a great place to just get started with. We should
Absolutely.
stop doing this. I know we're coming up on time, so I want to be respectful, and I'd love to ask you my last question because I think this is really important as we kind of enter into a world where everything changes so fast, right? And so, how, as you guys are thinking about this brand and the story that you have and the evolution with culture and perspective changing what feels like every day, but also fragmenting where it's becoming more difficult to. I think the ability to have so many options means that we can have so many different cohorts of people. How do you create a
Mhm.
brand, or how do you stay culturally relevant as you evolve this brand, as the ecosystem continues to shift?
Yeah, I think my bold answer is shut up and listen. If you listen, the audience will tell you exactly what matters to them. We see uh, more consumers and trends and fads starting and ending within TikTok and Instagram, and everyone has an opinion. So it's like quiet your voice and listen, because consumers are going to tell you exactly what they care about and what they don't. And I think when we show up in ways that still feel true to our brand, so for Charlotte's Web, sustainability, transparency, advocacy, uh, we get to step into this concept or this notion of relevance doesn't mean always chasing a trend or a fad. It means being part of something bigger. And like to your point, this cultural conversation that is evolving and changing on a daily basis. But if you're constantly chasing the fad, you're going to have nothing to talk about in 2 weeks because the fad's going to be done over. No one cares. Um, and I think boil it down, like we don't just stand for wellness, or we don't just sell wellness, like we stand for it. And I think that's through all of the noise and all of the shifting of fads, we're not someone that's just going to sell it and like, oh, push this product and oh, buy this and like, oh, here's a promo. It's we stand for something bigger, and I feel like that does help us cut through the noise and attract consumers in this very organic, genuine way. And so, yeah, I mean, shut up and listen.
Shut up and listen. I
That's
love
my
it. That's a great way to end. So, Tyler, thank you so much for joining us. I really loved it. If someone wants to find you, learn more about you, where can they go?
Yeah, so I'm on LinkedIn, Tyler Milakis. I also have my website, www.tylermalakis.com. Um, Track me down. I'd love to continue the conversation.
I love it. Thank you so much, Tyler. I really appreciate it.
Awesome. Thanks so much.